What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession podcast. My name is Sam. I'm your show host. Thanks for listening. This week, my guest, his name is Kyle Berges. And for those of you who have been following along for a while here at Fall Obsession, the last name may sound familiar. He's the brother of our Western Regional Coordinator, Tim Berges, here at Fall Obsession. You guys may remember Tim from our Flatland Deer Country film that we put out. From our 2023 mule deer hunt out there. He was featured in that. But Kyle is joining us to talk about his experience hunting brown bear on Kodiak Island. That's a very coveted hunt, a very coveted trip, a very extreme trip. And Kyle takes us deep into it, talking about the preparation for something like that. And then the reality of actually being out there, actually hunting these bears, multiple stalks on different bears throughout a 2-week period. Pretty extreme trip. This is a story you guys don't want to miss. Stick with us. Before we get into it with Kyle, though, got some discount codes for you guys listening to the podcast from our partners here that keep the wheels rolling and the lights on over here at Fall Obsession. The first one is Hoot Camo. If you guys shop with Hoot, you can use the code FallObsession15 at checkout. That's going to save you guys some money. Hoot Camo is a Texas-based company, but their patterns work everywhere. I have worn Hoot gear in the flatland plains of eastern Colorado, in the mountains in central Idaho, down here a lot in Texas, and the gear is phenomenal. It's high quality, keeps you warm, stands up against the elements and the brush, all that kind of stuff. The pattern's versatile, adapts to different environments. It's legit, guys, and the best part is it is at a price point that's realistic. It's not going to break the bank like some other name brand camouflage manufacturers. So shop with Hoot. Again, use that discount code, save some money. Go to hootcamo.com and check them out. Trophy Edits also has a discount code for you guys, and that's Fall Obsession. All lowercase, one word, if you want to save some money over there. Trophy Edits is basically like the next step in digital taxidermy, is a good way to put it. We all have mounts on our walls, antlers behind us like me here in the podcast video, that reflect a memorable moment in the woods, but we also have photos that do the same job. And if you guys want a photo that is professionally cleaned up, maybe the guts and blood are taken out of it, the lighting's cleaned up, some blurriness is resolved, whatever it might be, the Trophy Edits team takes care of that with you guys. Maybe it's a hunt with a loved one, a spouse, a family member, a child that you want to hang on the wall even. You can order prints through them as well. Again, think about it. It's Trophy Edits, and use that discount code to save some money. Go to the link in the description on this podcast, and that will take you guys over there, and you can start shopping around and see what they can do for you. Bear River Archery is the official bow shop of Fall Obsession podcast. They're located here in North Texas in the Van Alstyne area, so if you guys are local to us up here in the North Texas area, you need to head on over to Bear River. Let Justin know that you came from Fall Obsession, that we sent you to him, and he will take good care of you guys. Go check out Bear River Archery. The Outdoor Call radio app is partnered with Fall Obsession podcast. You can hear our show streaming on the Outdoor Call radio app every Monday, on a loop with some other hunting shows and podcasts we all know and love. That's what the Outdoor Call radio app is. It's a free streaming platform where you can hear different shows every single day of the week. You can also hear Outdoors Dan, their show host. He does some live radio show broadcast at local Midwestern radio shows throughout the week. And if you follow him on social media, you can also catch those live broadcasts even if you are not local to the radio stations. So again, it's the Outdoor Call radio app. It is free to download. You can start listening and streaming immediately. Go download it today. Derek Eves and Ridge Rock Hunt Company are some other good people that we've worked with here at Fall Obsession. If you're looking to book a hunt with a vetted and trusted outfitter in North America, then you need to give Derek a call. He'll work with you on all the details and find something that works right for you. Again, it's Ridge Rock Hunt Company. Go check them out. Thank you guys for streaming another Fall Obsession podcast episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. But while you're listening, or at least before you leave, make sure that you hit that follow or subscribe button, whatever's up there for you. Turn the notifications on if that's an option. That way you guys know every week when we drop a new Fall Obsession podcast episode. Go to the website, fallobsession.com. That's the hub. All of our content streams through that platform. We are a hunting and outdoor media production company. We do more than just this podcast. We have hunting shows, we have films, we have educational content in the forms of written articles and gear reviews, all sorts of stuff on the website. You can even support the brand with picking up a hat or a shirt over there at fallobsession.com. We always appreciate that. We have frequent sales going on, so all you got to do is head on over to the social media page and see if we got any smoking deals happening right now. It's normally pinned to the top of our pages, and we're on all the major social media platforms. We post multiple times a day, giving you guys updates from the field and from our team of pro and field staffers, brand ambassadors, and show producers that are throughout the country doing good work for us. So make sure you guys are tuned in. Don't miss anything happening over here at Fall Obsession. And finally, make sure that you are streaming our shows on Carbon TV. Carbon TV is like Netflix for hunting, basically a free hunting and outdoor streaming platform that you can download to an app on your phone, pull it up in a browser on your computer or on your smart TV, whatever it might be. And again, start streaming for free immediately. You guys can hear this podcast on Carbon TV, as well as our staff-inspired video podcast series called Couch Chats. And then we have 2 different hunting shows on Carbon TV called Texas Dirt and Midwest Mindset. Start streaming today. Thanks for hanging with me through the intro. We're going to head on over to our conversation with Kyle now and talk about his brown bear hunt in Kodiak, Alaska. You guys are listening to another Fall Obsession podcast.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down. Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession podcast. My name is Sam, hosting you guys. And my guest this week is a gentleman named Kyle Berges. Welcome to Fall Obsession Podcast, Kyle.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Man, it's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this one and hearing your story and everything. And the last name might be familiar to some of our returning listeners. You're the brother of one of our team members here at Fall Obsession, Tim. But I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell our listeners firsthand who you are and everything. So just give us a little bit of background about where you're from and your hunting journey so far.
Sure, absolutely. So, as you said, name's Kyle Berges. Been hunting ever since I was a young kid. Born and raised in a suburb of Denver, Colorado. Been mainly hunting on the family farm, but had some opportunities recently to step out into other places of the world and really dive into some diverse hunting experiences.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, Tim always keeps me tuned in to some of the adventures that he's got going on with y'all's couple trips to Africa and, you know, all these adventures all around. And I had the privilege of being able to join your family up there last year in 2023 on a mule deer hunt out there on the family farm. And y'all got a pretty awesome little place out there to chase some muleys and whitetails, I have to say. It's fun times for sure.
No, appreciate that.
So, man, you're talking about these, opportunities to kind of expand your horizons and go on different types of hunts and everything. And we have a very specific story that we want to kind of highlight and discuss in this episode. So, set the stage for us. Where were your sights set, and what kind of hunt were you trying to go on?
Sure. So just some background on this situation. So I most recently took a trip to Kodiak, Alaska for a brown bear hunt this past October and November. Got on the island of Kodiak, met my master guide, and pretty much set off in a seaplane off to Molina Lake on a Fognac Island, where Steve Rennell and Remy were hunting elk a few years back, and we're out there in the bush for 10, 12 days, something like that. So
Wow.
quite the long experience of a hunt out there.
That's awesome. What interested you in an opportunity like that?
I think for me, uh, growing up hunting here in Colorado, you're really accustomed to mule deer and elk, and you can always take your aim at a black bear here in the mountains. But something just really drew me to brown bears experience. I mean, to me, the pinnacle of hunting North America is that brown bear experience. There's not a larger land carnivore on this side of the world. So I think for me, it was just trying to go after something I knew that was a true challenge and really test my mettle.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I feel like everybody has those experiences or those hunts that, fit that criteria for them and everything. And, for me being from Texas, it's like Colorado and what you guys call home. That's one of them for me, right? That I've been very limited on the opportunities to be able to go out there and do that kind of thing. But, it's always interesting for people to hear people from different parts of the country talk about, where they truly want to go, what those bucket list hunts are, because it varies so much. So I'm always I'm always curious what the draw is. And on that note too, um, talk a little bit about your preparation going into it. What were some of the things that you were trying to do to prepare yourself or get the right gear, whatever it might be, for a hunt like this?
Sure. So, I was told it's going to be cold, wet, and miserable all the way around, and get prepared for that and everything to get wet. So I was told no cotton and no upland gear for pheasant hunting. So
Yeah.
I quickly started buying through some different companies that I knew that they had some pretty decent gear. I bought some specific Hanwag boots and merino wool socks and doubled up on merino gear and anything that was waterproof and Gore-Tex, just having doubles and triples because I knew it would just eventually get soaked through, and that ended up being the case for sure. I was pretty happy having double and triple of everything. So, up there, the things I would change is I would have maybe some additional gear from a company called Rona. They're a big time skiing and mountaineering company, and I thought their gear is what really helped me the most. I had some Gore-Tex full snow pants that had some insulation that worked extremely well, and I had some lighter pants that were really well for hiking in the mornings and late at nights, getting on and off the mountain. So,
Gotcha. What other kind of, just as far as like tactically trying to prepare yourself for Alaska, for brown bear, that kind of stuff, what kind of research were you doing? Were you looking at articles or watching videos, or how were you trying to prepare yourself for that side of it?
I mean, of course, I was watching Steve Rinella hunt probably almost every day on repeat, trying to figure out where I'll be and get a lay of the land and some vegetation. I was looking some topographical maps, and I like going to the gym for me and lifting a lot of weights and doing some cardio. So I really tried to up my game on the Stairmaster and things like that. And one thing that really helped me is, even in Colorado here, I'm at 6,000 elevation, but I was using a respirator training mask for high elevation. And Kodiak is at sea level, but I knew if I could grow my lungs as big as possible, that I wouldn't feel so winded. And working with a heavy pack every day, you're carrying 30, 40 pounds, but it's not the weight that gets you. It was your footing that definitely got you on the island. Is every other step you're slipping. So pretty hard to prepare for that, but I felt like the best I could do was just try to train my lungs and train my legs to get ready to carry a lot of weight and move for at least an hour to 2 hours at a time. So
Yeah. So, little sidebar on that, here, and you talk about footwear and your feet and everything. What did you have for footwear? And I asked just because I'm fresh off of a central Idaho elk hunt, hunting elk in the mountains at 8,000 feet this past year. And as a Texas boy, my footwear choice was absolutely terrible. So what do you recommend?
Yeah, so I used Hanwag's Alaskan GTX. They're really good for trekking boots. I thought they worked pretty darn well. After reviewing their catalog, they have some gear that may be a little bit more aggressive for this type of hunt. I would have gone with a little bit more of a mountaineering boot instead of a trekking boot, simply just because the ground is so shifty, and we did put crampons on a couple different days. I mean, I had weather on this island that was anywhere from 6 inches of snow, 4 inches of rain in 3 days. I had a 90-mile-per-hour wind, but a 3.9 earthquake. I had just about a whole slew. I even had days where it was 45 degrees with no wind, so it was quite unpredictable. So I'd say have probably the most aggressive boot you can. So anything geared for mountaineering. I really like the Hanwags, simply because they fit my feet well. I mean, you definitely got to have something that fits your individual foot, and everyone's a little bit different. But for me, for weight and the warmth I had and comfortability, I think they worked pretty darn well for me.
Awesome. Good to know for sure. So let's get down to business a little bit with this hunt. You're heading up there. You're meeting up with your guides, and you mentioned to me actually, and just as a side note for our listeners, before we start recording, you told me that one of your guides was Dustin Preedy, who's the husband, I believe, of a guest we just had on our show, Courtney Preedy from her Outdoor Journey and Soul Summit podcast. So kind of cool how, you know, all lanes of this world intersect somehow. I think that's pretty awesome. But take us into the ascent up to Alaska and how all that went down.
Sure. Yeah, so that's absolutely right. Yeah, my guide out in the field was Dustin Preedy, and he's an absolute beast and hard hunter out there. But to knock it off, I started out in Denver, Colorado, flew from DIA up to Anchorage, ended up staying one day in Anchorage, did a little sightseeing, flew over to Kodiak Island, quickly met my master guide, Rick Hoskins, and Dustin and Courtney all at the airport. Got checked into a Best Western there, stayed about 2 or 3 days in town before we ended up, getting ready to ship off and on Island Air. And the reason for that we got up there early is the weather on the island is so unpredictable that you could get stalled out in Anchorage for a day or 2 days, that you definitely want to have some extra time. And sure, waiting around wasn't ideal, but I'd rather be waiting around instead of missing 2 or 3 days of really good hunting out there.
Right.
So after that time, we went ahead and shipped out to Island Air on Kodiak, flew to a fog neck island near Lower Molina Lake, and we just started getting camp all set up when we were there. It was myself and Dustin and another hunter and another guide out in the field, and we were fortunate enough, when we were flying in, we could see Roosevelt elk, and that was quite the experience flying in.
Nice.
And when we got settled in the camp, that night, actually, a herd of about 80 Roosevelt elk bedded down outside of camp from us, maybe 150 yards away, and that was quite the experience. And I want to say it was quite the welcoming to the island.
Yeah.
Letting you know that there's a lot around you, and these things were absolutely massive. They're a lot larger than our Rocky Mountain elk here, so it was quite the spectacle.
Man, that's awesome. How you say just outside of camp? How far are we talking?
150 yards max. We had 80 of them bed down, and it was pretty cool. The next morning we got up and we started heading up this mountain ridge, and you could see their beds still, and they were just probably, like I said, 80 to 90 elk around there. And as we started walking up this ridge, you could see where the herd had moved, maybe a quarter of a mile, maybe a half mile from camp, further back up the road, and we just watched 80, 90 head of elk just getting their morning drink up there in a little pond.
Wow, that's awesome. So, are are y'all moving camp with y'all, or is this like your base camp that y'all have set up at this point?
So we decided to keep base camp. We had the option of setting out and doing a satellite camp wherever we chose, but you know, Dustin, really in shape guy, and at the time, you know, I felt like I could move decently well with him. We decided that, you know, we weren't gonna move camp unless we became truly desperate, and you know, we weren't really seeing anything. So for us, we were hiking 2 miles a day up and 2 miles a day down, something like that. So just base camp at that point.
Gotcha. Okay. So we're in the mountains. We're a day into it at this point. Got camp set up. How are we seeing bears right away, or how's all that working out for you?
Yeah, so first day we tried to get up somewhere a little higher elevation, get some more area that we could glass. Kind of got fogged out, and some snow came in, and we thought that, you know, there's no reason to be sitting here if we're just looking in fog and have the wind push our scent around. We'll just call this one a day and go back in. But the next day we headed up in the dark, started walking, heading for this ridge line. As we got up, Dustin gets to the top of this ridge and quickly waves me up there and telling me to be quiet but hurry up. And as I approach him, there's somewhere between a 9.5 and a 10-foot bear paw print in the ice that had been walking around either that previous night or that morning. And it was quite the sight. We followed his track all over up there. He had acted like he'd just been doing laps on top of this ridge, and that was pretty darn cool to see first thing, you know, as you're getting up there first thing in the morning. Never ended up seeing that bear, but that first day we saw 6 different bears that first day, anywhere from, I'd say, a half mile to a mile away to 3 miles away, just in one of these giant bowls we're just glassing all day.
Wow. So I have a couple of questions just as a guy. Like, again, I've said it a couple of times now, but guy from Texas, I have never personally hunted bear. It's on my list, and I got a long list, but it's on the list. Educate me a little bit. How do you know that the track you're looking at is for a 9 or 10-foot bear?
Sure. So I had the same question for Dustin, and he was telling me that, you know, you can measure the width of the paw print with your finger and thumb, and you know, he was the one that was telling me, you know, this is roughly what we'll say in length it is, you know, based on how far the width is, and then also just the sheer length of the print. You could tell this was a very large bear that had made this print. So I just went off what he was telling me, and Dustin was a pretty upstanding guy. I know that, you know, some hunters or some outfitters may tell you, you know, this is a 9-10 foot bear, and it may only be, you know, 8.5. But Dustin told me before, you know, like when I say it's 9.5, like it's truly 9.5. It is a big bear. It's the big one in the area. So.
Wow. And then what about when you're glassing? Because you just mentioned a second ago that y'all saw 6 bears or whatever it was. When you're looking at them at that great distance, how do you know if it's one worth going after?
Sure. Yeah. You know, these were all questions that I had to ask Dustin for myself. So eternally grateful for his knowledge and his expertise. And
Yeah.
he was telling me, you know, some things you want to look for, especially on brown bear or just bear in general, is you want to look for the size of the skull, and look for the position of the ears. If it's got long ears, it's a more of a yearling bear, more mature. If it's got a big old skull and tiny ears and they're on the side, you know that bear's got a bigger skull, so it's got to stretch that skin out. The other thing that we noticed right away, that I think was the most impressive to me, is their walk. And you can watch their front shoulder girdle. If they're walking normal and they look like they're walking upright, and maybe a smaller bear, you'll see the big bears really have to swing their shoulders because it's such a long leg bone that got to bring that thing full circle. And our first day up there, we saw probably an 8.5 foot sow walking around. And the other thing I was told is look for the coloring of the bear. The sows, or a smaller bear, may look much lighter, more like a traditional grizzly bear, more kind of gold yellow, where a bigger bear, big boar, may look a little darker, more chocolate covered, things like that. So they're very small things to look for, but they're definitely defined when you can start looking at different bears and kind of compare them to each other.
Gotcha. Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for the little education there. Like I said, I'd never hunted bear before myself, and I'm always curious about these kind of things and hoping it'll pay off one day for me, get to go do it myself. But let's pick back up where we left off in your story and everything.
Sure. So first day, saw about 6. We saw a bunch of cubs. That was pretty cool. Saw some cubs that were about 3 years old, so they're on that last year. It was definitely educational, and we didn't see any bears that were legal bears. We saw maybe one legal bear, but it was a little far away, so we decided not to go chase it. When it's 3 miles away, there's no reason to put your scent all over the place, especially if it's walking away from you. And then we're just looking toward the north, so we're just looking at the snow caps on Alaska's peninsula all day too. So it was pretty darn cool being up there. Over the next couple of days, we kept seeing bears, kept seeing more and more elk. We saw 14 bulls all gathered up together that would have all made fine mounts and things like that. And unfortunate not to have an elk tag with us and be out of season for that. Ended up chasing one sow that we saw. It was a good looking sow. She, somewhere between 7.5, 8 feet tall. And Dustin and I start hightailing it across this ridge and trying to keep eyes on this thing. And there's a river that it needs to cross, more like a little stream it needs to cross. And we're counting out, different landmarks that we can see. So we were measuring beaver ponds and different patches of trees like that, so we could communicate with each other quickly and kind of figure out where did we last see this thing. And as we're running down, this bear kind of acted spooked and ran across the river, which, being native to Colorado and not being around bears very much, it's kind of interesting to see a 800-pound animal get spooked and run across a little stream. I never would have imagined that. But we quickly got in position in the alder brush, and we pulled out a predator call and started calling. She took off running toward us, probably from 700, 600 yards away, closed the gap down to 400 real quick, probably within 30 seconds. And then we kept calling her, and she was just navigating this alder brush, I'd say no less than an hour and a half, 2 hours, and just taking her time, not really seeming very interested. We're trying to make noise up in the alders, trying to get her to come in a little closer. I asked Dustin if this was normal, and he said absolutely not. I've never had this experience.
Oh wow.
And we see this bear just clearing small little brushes of grass here and there, and getting the open, still too far away, trying to call, have her get closer. All of a sudden we lose her, and then she reappears about 60 seconds later, and you can just see her head. You can't see vitals, you can't see anything else. She's about 215, 220 yards away, and we're just staring through crosshairs at her, and she won't step out at all. And she was a great looking bear, big, broad front shoulders, and we're just hanging out there watching her for about 5 minutes through scopes. And then all of a sudden I feel the wind push on my hand that's supporting my rifle, and Gus and I go, oh yeah, that's it. And then she smelled us and just took right on off, and never saw her again. She didn't even bother to look back. So
wow,
that was the first bear that we encountered that we put a stalk on, and she just was out of there.
Wow. So I didn't ask this earlier. What's your loadout for your weapon?
Sure. So I had a Fierce Firearm 338 Lapua carbon rifle, but that one I had to send in to get worked on. Unfortunately, it just wasn't holding a pattern. So I took my backup, which was a Savage 110 BA 338 Lapua Magnum, with a VX6 4 to 24 by 52 scope on it, and it weighed just shy of 16 pounds.
Wow.
And so Dustin nicknamed it the boat anchor.
I wonder why.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it wasn't very comfortable, but it had plenty of firepower behind it. So all I knew is I just needed to connect, and it was going to do the job. So
Yeah. And then obviously you're bear hunting and everything, so I'm sure there's folks that are curious if you have any kind of sidearm or anything like that going on for that worst case scenario.
no, so that I was told by my master guide that most guys leave them in camp. I definitely learned quickly why they would. It's just so much weight. For me, I came to camp with what I was told was one of the lightest packs that my guides had ever picked up, and I had plenty of gear, plenty of lightweight gear. Puffies work. Absolutely endorse puffies on this trip. Have several of them. But for sidearms, I had bought a 500 Smith & Wesson a few years back specifically for this hunt, and I was told that I'd just leave it in camp. There was one instance that I wish I had it with me, but outside of that, I would not have carried it with me. I would have maybe kept it in my pack, but definitely not on my chest or anything like that. I was told, your guide has a rifle, and Dustin was carrying a 375, and I'm carrying a 338, and if you can't get it done with the two rifles, you shouldn't be out there. And I totally agreed with that statement. So,
Gotcha. Okay. So with this first encounter, you talked about the gap that this bear closed. What's going through your mind as all this is going down?
yeah, I mean, first thing is I'm thinking there's a lot of alder brush in front of us, and this thing is going to tear through that, and I'm just going to be quiet and try to listen for where it comes through, and hopefully it slows down as it gets a little closer. The other thing I'm thinking is, well, I wish we were a little higher, but being higher would have pushed us out of range and made it a little worse for wind coming over the other side of the ridge. And so it was kind of a really difficult scenario to thread the needle. So I was just thinking, this is the cards that we have, and this is the hand we're dealt, and just be quiet, be patient, just continue to be patient, and let that thing come in. So,
Gotcha. Last question before we keep moving, and sorry I keep having them pop up, but you got my mind going on all this stuff.
sure.
You talked about this being a female bear. What are the rules or the expectations up there as far as male, female, what you can and can't hunt? Because I know it somewhat varies from bear to bear, species to species, whatever it might be. And then I've always heard you can't shoot a female bear with cubs on her. What's
Sure,
the expectation?
Sure. Yeah, so I was told by Fish and Game in my specific unit, and I believe this is true for most units up there, that female bears are legal as long as they don't have cubs with them. That's the only draw on them. And you can't, of course, you can't shoot a cub. So
Right.
That's what I was told, is you can take a boar or a sow. So.
Okay. Gotcha. Cool. Awesome. So you got that first stalk out of the way. Pretty cool encounter. Where are we going from there?
Sure. So ended up going to a different bull. We've visited this bull before, seen one bear 2.5, 3 miles off, and the issue we kept running into is we would see these bears toward the coast and out toward the coast was just a bunch of evergreen and spruce and pine, and they would just get in there, and you had no hope of seeing them. Even if you could haul over 3 miles to get over there, once you're in the spruce and pine, if they smell you, you'd never know that they ran out of there. It's worse than the alder thicket trying to hunt bears in there. So we were in this other bowl, and Dustin told me this is where Steve and Romy had downed their elk, was in this specific bowl we were in. And we had seen a bear 2 days prior in there, so we knew there was at least one boar walking around. And I told Dustin, I'm trying not to be too picky. I'm just looking for a boar. I don't care if he's 8 feet tall. I don't care if he's 10 feet tall at this point. I just want a dark boar bear. I didn't want to limit myself.
Right.
And so we're watching here, and we see one bear. After we've been sitting there for 4 or 5 hours, we had a lot of fog this day. So you're looking into fog from, I'd say, 9 in the morning when sunrise finally hit, 8 in the morning. And we didn't see this bear until the fog lifted at 12:30. And it gets kind of eerie sitting up there, being like, am I just wasting my time here? Am I pushing my scent around too much by just hanging out in fog? And I thought, I'm just going to sit here and just keep glassing and just wait for this fog to roll out. And if it does, then great. And so we see this thing about 2 miles away, maybe a mile and a half. Just kind of depends on which route you would take to get to this thing. And it's walking from one drainage, and it's walking toward the alders. And we're like, well, not ideal, but it's walking semi toward us along the way, and we can kind of mark it. Let's get going. So we take off running. We're running through alders. We're running down through some spruce. And as we're going through this spruce, you can see where the bears had ripped down all the tree limbs and clawed up all the trees and marked everything and kind of made it their house. And it's pretty eerie being in there when there's no wind, and you're like, yeah, this is definitely where they live. Mm-hmm. And we get running over here. So we're going through the alders. Haven't seen this bear for 30 minutes, so don't even know if he's still there or not. Just kind of having faith. Get over to this spot, and up above us, about 250 yards, is a whole herd of elk, different herd of elk this time. Probably 100, 150 elk just hanging out up there. And Dustin and I are like, oh no, we can't get up there, up above, and try and shoot down toward this bear from, if it emerges from the alders. We're just going to have to go through this alder thicket or try to get below it or something like that, because we were fearful if we bumped the elk, we'd bump anything else that was in the area.
Right.
And so we figure, let's just keep moving. Let's look for some open spots where we might be able to draw this bear out and get a decent opportunity here. So we find this open spot that's probably got at least 100 yards of grass in front of it up to these alders, kind of get some cover by some big trees, just camouflage ourselves as much as possible down there. So we get down there, we see the bear moving, and he's only 300 yards away at this point, and then the elk are only 100, 150 yards away from him. And I'm thinking, I cannot believe these elk are not getting skittish and running out of there with this big predator hanging out. And we get down and we're like, well, we lost him, don't know where he is. And we're trying to figure out if we need to move further back or further down or what we need to do. And all of a sudden we see this massive object, brown object up above us, behind us a little. And Dustin, drop quick, pull up, get ready to go. And it's a lot of movement. After you've been running, you're gassed out and you're sweating, you drop to your poles, try to rack your rifle real quick and get ready to line up a shot, put the crosshairs on him, can barely see his vitals, but he's stepping out just enough that, you can see his back, you can see the front shoulder. I'm like, all right, are we ready to go? And he's like, yeah, go ahead. So Dustin's just off to my left. maybe 5 feet away, just one step in front of me. So I pull I'm dropping quick. I can't hold steady super well, but I'm like, I think I got him. Take the shot. Dustin shoots right after me, and this bear just darts straight back in the alders. And I was like, I was trying to celebrate because I thought, oh man, this is day 7 at this point of a 14-day hunt. I was getting kind of worried we weren't going to see anything. Like let's just celebrate and be happy. I'm high-fiving Dustin, being ecstatic, thanking him for helping me set up this opportunity. And he's like, well, we got to go find it. I'm like, yeah, we do. So we get walking up there, and he's like, let's just find some blood and start there. And we're spending probably an hour just trying to find some tracks. And we find these tracks, don't see any blood in them, follow them a little bit for a half mile, something like that, through the alders, and we don't see this. And we're like, we're not going through the alders looking for a bear anymore. We need to get out of here. We don't know where he's at. And that was the situation that I wish I had a 500 Smith & Wesson with me. If you're walking up on a bear in the alders and you don't know if he's alive or not, I don't want to be trying to shoulder a 16-pound rifle. I'd rather just have a hand cannon with me.
Yeah, no joke.
And so we're like, we don't see any blood. And he was talking with me, and he's like, the thing that we always look for on bears, when you hit them, they'll spin, or they'll try to bite back where the bullet was, because it'll feel like they need to itch or bite or something like that. I'm like, okay. I didn't see that either. And he was telling me the muzzle blast from my rifle, my break, had pushed him off his mark. And I was like, oh no. So I was like, all right, well, that's too bad. And then the elk just hung out the entire time. I couldn't understand that. They didn't move. They didn't care, one lick that we shot these high power rifles, or that we're just moving through the brush below them 150 yards. And so we're noticing time. We got to get out of here. Don't want to be up here in the dark, and as far away as we are from where we entered the bowl. We need to go.
Yeah.
So we start running back, and on our way back, we bump a bear. And I'm like, oh no, I'm exhausted at this point. I'm sweating. My clothes are drenched. I feel like my pride is bruised as much as my Achilles and my calves at this point. So Dustin's yelling at me, get it together. Let's get going. So we're sprinting around on poles, and we see this bear just briefly, and it's jumping through the alders and jumping brush to brush. And, this goes out the window with everything of, we got to stalk bears, and it's just like, no, just chase them down, just try and get them through the forest and get them in a bad spot. And I'm like, oh, great, here we go. And, I hear it rustling, and Dustin, he's trucking ahead. He's probably 100 yards in front of me, and I yell at him, and I'm like, I can see the bear. I can see it moving and jumping. And he stops and sees it, and it's running through another set of spruce. And so we get to chasing, and we can't even identify how big this thing is yet. We just know it's a bear, and it's big, and it's brown, dark brown. And so we finally get to a spot where we can see it, and we see this track that it had left behind. And he's like, you know what? I don't think we want to shoot this bear. And I'm like, why? He's like, this thing's only 6.5 feet tall, maybe 7 at most. And we end up seeing it. He's like, it's just a small sow. He's like, we don't want to shoot this thing. It's not big enough. You wouldn't feel right having this thing. He's like, I've seen black bears bigger than this. And so I got my heart pumping, and I was like, hey, thanks. I really appreciate the cardio here. I didn't have enough on this trip. And so we make our way out of there, and ended up finding some paths that even some river otters had made, which was super handy to try to get out. So we got out that day, and that was the experience. So I had 2 stalks on the same day, technically, even though one of them was just get it going. Let's just run after this thing as hard as we can.
So were y'all thinking that y'all had the bear that you shot at? Were y'all thinking that it was a miss because you talked about how he didn't come back and try to bite the entry wound or anything like that, like he was being attacked? Or Was that y'all's thought process at this point?
Yeah, so we basically thought we found his prints and we followed him for quite some ways in the alders, and we could find where he had been moving around in the alders, and we're like, there's just no blood anywhere.
Yeah.
Like there'd have to be some blood, and when we shot, we didn't see him do any type of movement. He, seeing that he'd been wounded or anything, he just ran straight into the alders and took off, and so we figured he's either cleared the alders and gone, or he's going to be camped out in there, and we're not going to find him anytime soon. And with dusk coming and the sun starting to set, we need to get off the mountain because we just don't want to be up there in the dark. Slippage and fall is a big concern. Up there hiking, I told people, I'm an avid skier. I told people it was just like hiking up and down a double black diamond run is exactly how I describe it.
Gotcha.
It's pretty darn steep, and you feel like you're going to fall forward every other step. So, if you're a big time skier, like you'll feel at home and pretty safe being able to shift your weight. And if not, if you're from the Midwest, I can imagine it's got to be pretty eerie. So
yeah. Well, definitely some eventful encounters. And you said this was day 7 of a 14-day hunt. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I believe it was day 7 that this all happened. It was either 6 or 7. They start to blur, and I was just like, oh man, I don't know when I'm going to see a male bear. That was the first male bear that we saw within 3 miles for more than 10 seconds.
Wow.
We saw a lot of sows up to this point. So I mean the bears are there. There's a lot of country, and there's a lot of dense habitat for them. But I mean, I learned real quick hunting bears. You could see them for all of 10 seconds, and they'll disappear the rest of the day.
Yeah.
They could just hide in the alders, and you would never know. So
yeah, it's crazy the hiding spots that critters have out there in the wilderness. So we got I guess we're only halfway through your trip at this point, but I can relate to the feeling of spirits being low. I wasn't in the mountains for that amount of time this year on my elk hunt, but we had a similar experience with just not being able to get in on the elk or seeing that many. So I know the feeling. Where are we going from here? What's happening on day 8?
Yeah, so day 8 we went up to the previous area we'd been in, different bull. Again, we just switched back and forth between these bulls every other day, and we'd seen some more bears. Didn't see anything that we could really go chase. So day 8 passed. Day 9 we get up on this where I had previously just chased that bear and that sow, that female, that last day on day 7. And so we're up there in the fog and the snow, and it is a bitter cold day. My toes are getting numb. It's starting to bite through my clothes, and it's just everything's just wet and just a nice little sleet and some sloppy rain. And we're hanging out up there, and we're just watching the clouds come off the ocean and just looking straight into fog until about, I want to say 5 p.m. that evening. It finally lifts, and within 5 minutes I see a bear. It looked like a decent sized boar, walking from one patch of trees to the other. He was just about where we had shot at that bear distance wise. So I knew he's about a mile and a half out, something like that. And he's walking in our direction. And so I tell Dustin, I'm at my wit's end right now. I don't know how much time we have. Like, we either need to do this now or we need to wait another day and see what we can do here, because we're going to barely have time to line something up just based on daylight. So I'm like, hit the predator call. Like, I'm just hit it. Let's see what happens. So we hit it, and I don't know if the bear can hear it from this far or not, but he keeps moving our way. And I'm thinking, all right, so Dustin, can we go? And he's like, it's your call. We can either go or we can sit and wait. And I'm like, you know what? I think we can run it and gun it. Let's just start hauling. So we quickly strip layers, and I think that's what takes the most amount of time. So, going back to the whole gearless thing, I tell people buy zip off clothes. You want to be quick. That's definitely the thing, having, pants that can zip off really quick is ideal. So we start running back through, the terrain we'd been through where we saw this sow a couple days prior. And as we're running through, it still gets eerie, and we end up seeing one bear carcass, and Dustin's like, yeah, that bear was probably 8.5 feet tall. He's like, these femurs are huge. And it would have been a bear that had been eaten. It was a full carcass of a bear that was eaten by another bear.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, this is cool. We're going after what I think is a decent sized male bear. In my mind, I wanted to say he was 8.5 to 9 feet tall. Maybe he was just 8. But in my mind, we're going through this area that we know that's covered up in bears, and we find a carcass. Like, okay. And so we're running through the alders, and we're really cooking it. And we're thinking we need to just keep on pushing and closing distance at this time because we're just out of daylight. We're running the clock. And we kind of get to this fork in the road, and we're like, we can go left, we can go right. We're kind of stalled here. We're sitting at this alders, and, to our right, there's this drainage, maybe 40 yards away or something like that. And then, past that drainage, there's a lot of grass that's open and goes up a mountain. And I'm like, okay, well, we can definitely see that way. Behind us is some pine and some spruce and things like that. In front of us is just a bunch of alder, and I'm like, well, I don't know how much we can see through that, but that's the way he's coming from. And then to our left, there's just more pine and spruce and alder brush. And I'm like, okay, well, we're in this spot. He's got to come through to us. We'll just keep calling him, see what we can do. I had brought another predator call, so we try hitting this thing. And Dustin hits it real hard. Great job hitting it. And, we just wait real quiet. And not even 3 seconds later, we just hear all this crashing to our right, where that open kind of patch is. And we just see this big brown object just running, absolutely sprinting across the other side of the drainage. And then all of a sudden just duck straight down in the drainage. And I'm going, Dustin, I don't know what to do right now. Like, we need to back up. Like, we need to give us some space. And so we start backing up, and he's like, get up the hill a little. I'm like, okay, great call. Like, I'm glad you're thinking this through. And so we start moving back, and I got this boat anchor I'm trying to shoulder and keep crosshairs on because I'm like, I don't know if this thing's coming through or not. And Dustin's playing it pretty cool, and all of a sudden this bear you can just see its face, and it is just sprinting through the drainage coming up. And then it sees us, I'd say 25 yards away, and then just immediately stands straight up. And it's the sow we had seen from the previous day, that 6.5, 7 foot sow. And it just stands there and then huffs at us. And Dustin clinks his metal poles together and just says, get out of here. And it hesitates for a second, then just turns around and just sprints right back out of there. And I'm like, well, it's small for Kodiak size, but that's still a 500-pound animal sprinting at us. That is an eating machine. It's gets your heart pumping pretty darn quick.
I was gonna ask, man, what is going through your mind when all this is going down? Holy cow!
All I thought is, I got this giant gun that's just full metal. Let's get ready to punch around. And if for some reason that doesn't do it, at least this thing feels like a spear. It's long, it's heavy, and it's full metal. And I'm like, I'm glad I got Dustin with me. That was one thing I got to give hats off to him. And I told him on the trip, and, I'm eternally grateful that the entire time I felt safe with him. And I think that's one thing that when you're selecting a guide, you definitely need to feel, and sometimes you may not know until you're put in these situations, but I felt like he was in control. He was calm and collective, especially under these high pressure situations. So,
yeah.
For me, like it was we're on our game, and we got to perform here real quick. But I was extremely thankful and blessed that he was there. So
Yeah, for sure. You said she stood up at, you say 25 yards?
yeah, about 25 yards.
So is that where you first saw her again, or did you see her like running toward you and then she stopped and stood at that distance?
We saw her running toward us, up through the drainage, and I think she could kind of see us. We're just two dudes standing there out in the grass, and she probably cleared the drainage by 10 yards and then stood up, and huffed at us. And I thought, yeah, well, I'm glad you stopped, because that would not have been a good day.
No, that was 25 yards away from a bad day.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Golly, man.
So yeah, so we finished that up, and we're, as we were doing that, and as we hit the predator call, all that fog came right back in. And I think that was the most eerie thing, is we already had low visibility just due to vegetation and where we were, and with the fog then rolling in and you have even less, it's like, oh man, this is now a bad situation, and this could be a really bad situation if we're not careful. So we ended up calling it and saying, like, well, we're not going to get closer to this bear. We don't know where it's at. Even if we get closer, this fog, we can't see more than 30, 40 yards, and we can't get that close to shoot. So
Yeah.
let's call it. Let's get out of here. So we hightail it out of there, and we're hiking down, in the dark the rest of that night. And, it was one of those things like, yeah, I got my heart pumping. And, at that point I'm at, 4 total stalks, and, I felt pretty proud, at least for that. Like, doing 4 stalks is a lot. Dustin and my master guide Rick had told me they haven't had guys do 4 stalks, maybe 1, maybe 2, but most certainly not 4. And I'm like, well, it's a lot of work. And the next day we end up going up and hiking over on the other bowl. We didn't see anything, and at that point my Achilles on one of my heels was just killing me, and it felt like it was on fire. Anytime I'd bend down to try and tie my shoes or anything, I was like, this just hurts. And I kind of felt like I had ran all of my luck out of this trip. And so I was like, what, I'm cool calling it on day 11 or whatever it is at this point. Like, I've pushed the envelope here trying to see bears, and I'd pushed everything to the limit, physically I could, and I just feel like I couldn't get it to connect. And that's what I quickly learned out of the trip up there, is there are opportunities that you can make, and then there's just other opportunities that you got to have the animals in the right spot, and you got to put in a lot of work to be able to glass and things like that, and be in shape and have the right gear, and have a good guide with you. But there are some times where it is just a lot of luck based on being at the right place at the right time. So,
Oh yeah, 100%. I felt that in Idaho, just because you're looking at all these mountain ranges and all these different places, and you're like, what are the chances that I'm gonna have the animal I'm pursuing right here in front of me in this massive country? It's when you stop and think about it, it's like a crazy perspective almost. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing I learned a lot too up there is, good gear for sure, be in shape. But the other thing I would tell people is make sure you are absolutely stretching at night. I tried to stretch as much as I could at night, just keep my muscles loose, because especially being in the cold, everything wants to tighten up, and it can really start to hurt if you're not careful. But between Dustin and me, we were putting in 30,000 steps every day.
wow.
And that gets pretty tiring, carrying the pack, and it's, some of the ways shifted on one side versus the other, things like that. And I think those are things that people may forget to train for, is, it's not the weight, it's not the steps, it's all the little things, right? And, every other step we're slipping up there, and, and your pack's it's not always going to be, 50-50 split, between left and right, and, things like that. So
Yeah.
As much outside the box thinking for training you can do, the better. I think that's that's the big takeaway I had.
Gotcha. Yeah, especially when you're not acclimated or used to those kind of conditions, I mean, yeah, you can try to train and prepare, but it almost takes a time going and getting kind of humbled by it, I feel like, to truly understand what you're up against, almost in some circumstances at least.
Oh, sure. And there's always a case that, I wish I could have done this different, or I wish I would have done this different, or, oh, I could do that. That's not a problem until you're in it. And then it's just a completely different shift of things that you experience. I mean, you don't know until you've really done it. And, Dustin told me that, this is pretty difficult hunting. The only thing that may be more difficult is the way he does some doll sheep hunting. He was telling me where he'll go out and just hike and hike and hike over different mountain ranges. And it doesn't matter how far it is, if it's a 50 miles or 70 miles, whatever it is, he'll just keep going. And he's like, other than that, I'd say it's bear hunting. Bear hunting was all mental. It was really physical, and the weather is unforgiving. But just being up there, just looking, the first day we saw 6 bears. I'm like, well, they're here. And then, just one of my last days, I didn't see a bear at all. And I'm looking at the same piece of ground.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, yep, that's what it's all about. So,
yeah, man, I do have a question, because, and I don't know if I just missed the detail earlier when you mentioned it, but you talked about that bear carcass that you guys saw and how it had been eaten by other bears. Is that common? Because I've heard that like boars will kill the cubs to try and get the sow to cycle back into heat. But other than that, I haven't heard a whole lot about bears killing each other and eating each other. So can you explain a little bit more on that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, first day we noticed this, that big sow that I mentioned that was 8.5 feet tall, or super dark, that we thought, with the 2 cubs that were probably 3 years old. She was walking away from us, and we had spotted a boar probably half mile beyond her position. And she had smelt the boar, and immediately turned around and started running, and our cubs started running. So I think I learned real quick, like, no bear is really safe if it's a big boar and he's hungry enough. The other thing I think is that that small sow we saw, that was 6.5, that kind of rushed us. We kind of thought she may have been the first year out of being a cub, and that may have been the mom that got mauled and eaten by another bear. And I'm like, well, it's a strong possibility. So I've learned that, yeah, bears, the big boars, they'll eat an 8-foot sow if they want, but they'll definitely go after a sow with cubs, and they'll definitely kill the cubs easy. So
yeah.
And seeing that sow with her cubs just hightail it out of there, it's like, yep, you're a big sow and your cubs are still big, and you're saying no thanks.
Yeah, they're not one to mess with, for sure. You also talked about how your guides were, I mean, you mentioned the 4 stalks that you had, and how that number of stalks for that time frame, how that felt, how you felt like you were, giving it everything you had with that. As far as, did you get any feedback from your guides as far as what the expected number of stalks is for somebody that's hunting for that period of time, and how long does it normally take for somebody to actually kill a bear when they're out there for that stint?
Sure. They told us that it could take the entire time. It could take one day. Dustin told me a story prior of another gentleman that we had guided for, saw a 9.5-foot bear on the first day.
Golly.
And decided to pass it up. Saw it within 5 minutes of the first day, and just said, I'm not ready to shoot a bear yet, and then didn't shoot one the rest of the trip. So, I was told that it could take day one. It could take all 14 days. You never know, especially with the weather up there. You never know. But they said that one stalk, if you're going after a bear and you stalk it, you're gonna shoot it. Yeah. That's just how they kind of take that mentality, is if you're going to put in that effort and you're going to get there, the likelihood of you having another stalk is very low. And that's where I felt fortunate. I would attribute that to one, Dustin being in shape and being able to guide, and also myself being in shape enough to be able to run and gun, and really get after these bears is, it takes a lot. It really takes a lot of mental capacity and a lot of, ability to carry these packs and really sprint through that, open ground. So,
Oh yeah. So you didn't fill your tag, but do you consider this trip a success?
yeah, people always ask me that, and for me, Dustin, he wanted to set, my expectations early on, and he asked me like, "What are you looking to get most out of this trip?" And I work in the corporate office, things like that, and I work behind a desk. So I told him, number one, I want to be able to get away from screens, for 14 days or whatever it is, and really just enjoy like ground that really is untouched. So that was goal number one. Goal number two, of course, was a bear. And, he asked me, like, what do you want out of your bear? And I just said, look, I just want it to be dark, and I just want it to be a boar. Like, those are the two things I really want. I want a bear ultimately, but, like, I just want a dark boar. I don't care if it's 8 feet. I don't care if he's 10 feet. I would consider it a success because I had 4 stalks, and I got charged by a bear. And I got to see some of the huge bears. I got to see elk every day I was there. I was covered up in elk. And some of these elk, they look like moose. They're 1,200, 1,300 pound elk. They're just massive things walking around.
Wow.
So for me, I call it a success. And the real question people always ask me is, well, did you have fun? I'm like, no, I didn't have fun. No, I didn't have any fun when I was there. Maybe just a little. But did I enjoy myself? Absolutely. Would I do it again? People always ask me that, and I didn't really have an answer until recently. And I'd say, oh yeah, I'd do it again. There's some things I would do differently. I would love to go to the same area and have Dustin again as my guide. Absolutely confident in him. Of course, I want to switch out the boat anchor. I don't want to take a 16-pound rifle with me again. And there's some there's some gear that I think I would trade out, things like that. And maybe some different training tactics before I get there. But, I absolutely would call it a success based on the parameters I had set before the hunt. Like I said, still wanted one, but I had every opportunity, that I could generate myself, and it just didn't click, unfortunately. But, I knew I gave it everything I had. So
Yeah.
I felt pretty accomplished in that sense that, I went to an extremely dangerous and remote place on the planet, and I had all these opportunities that no one else really was going to have. So I definitely call that a success.
That's awesome, man. I like what you said, in that I didn't have fun, but I enjoyed it. I can relate to that. And I'll tell you, like, me coming off the mountain in Idaho this year, I was ready to come home, and my feet were killing me. Had the wrong footwear the whole time, and I was on the fence on if I'd want to do it again. And it took some time back home, and I'm 100% in on doing an experience like that. And I think that part of it too is I feel like I would enjoy it more the second time, because now I know what I'm up against, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, absolutely.
well, man, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing that story. It sounds like an awesome experience and everything, and one that you'll not soon forget. What's the likelihood or the time frame for you to be able to do something like that again?
Sure. So I was told that my tag is a special type of tag, for Alaska. So I'm not even legally allowed to hunt brown bear or grizzly bear for 4 years in the state of Alaska. So, and then I was talking with my guide, briefly about it. I hadn't made a decision when I was talking to him, like, what's the time frame for a wait? And he is booked all the way out through 2029. So I'd have to go to 2030
Oh wow.
to try and get back there. So
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I've heard the 4 year rule before. I wasn't sure if that was just kind of in general or just specific areas, but yeah, I've heard that's pretty common, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know the bylaws about it and where all, you can go and where you can't, to get that reduced to 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is. One thing I forgot to mention, that I definitely wanted to on here is, there was another hunter in our group who hunted in a different area of Kodiak Island. Super nice guy, kind of older gentleman, a little bit more difficult for him to walk around or be mobile. And he struggled to move about 150 yards from place to place. He had some assistance and things like that, which was really accommodative. But he sat by a water source for 4 days and ended up shooting a 9.5 foot boar.
No kidding.
And he moved 150 yards every day and got one. And then here I am, moving 30,000 steps every day, going up and down ski runs basically. And so to me, that's why I say, I learned real quick that hunting it's all about having opportunities and being in the right place at the right time. And sure, you got to be in shape and you got to have the right gear and things like that. But sometimes it just comes down to good old fashioned dumb luck.
Man, that's a fact. Like, you can prepare yourself all you want, you can strategize all you want, and yeah, you can have all the tricks up your sleeve. But yeah, you saying that, it reminds me, my dad always talks about, way back in the day, he was part of a hunt club in South Carolina, and all these guys would go whitetail hunting. That is, they would all go way back deep into the woods to their stands and their setups and everything to hunt whitetail. And this one old timer would just go and pop a lawn chair next to the front gate, and he shot just as many, if not more, deer than anybody else on that place. So
yeah, it's the truth.
Yeah, there's something to it, man, for sure. That's funny. Well, Kyle, thank you again, man, for coming on the show and sharing the story. That was pretty cool to walk through all that with you. Appreciate it.
No, I really appreciate you having me. Great show, and looking forward to your success here in the coming months, coming years. So.
Well, same to you, man. I've heard plenty of stories from mule deer hunting out there in y'all's family place in Colorado, from Tim and everything. And like I said at the beginning, it's an awesome place y'all have out there. And I'm hopeful at least one of these years, maybe by some means, we get to meet and share hunting camp together. I think that'd be cool. So.
Absolutely.
Well, man, thank you again for our listeners tuning in. Thanks for listening to another Fall Obsession podcast. We'll be back with you guys again next week, and I'll catch you then.